Yo, 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 what is going on? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cut Different TV. I'm your host, Sebastian Ryder. Don't forget the Van Gogh. And today, man, let me tell y'all about today, man. Today is a very special day for Cut Different TV. And don't get me wrong, every guest that we have on Cut Different TV is very special in their own way. But it's not every day that you're able to have a pioneer on your platform. And trust me when I tell you, I'm not using that word pioneer lightly. This man has been putting in blood, sweat, and tears into the music industry for the past 20 years. Yes, that's 2 decades. He's the first AfroBeats artist to mix and master a full-length project in Abbey Road Studios. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's where the Beatles recorded their albums. Y'all might have heard of the Beatles, but anyways, without further ado, Duncan Daniels. Thank you for joining us today, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, man. It's so nice to be here.
Absolutely. And look, man, I mean, aside from you even being here on Cut Different TV, which is monumental in itself, the purpose of what we do here is we bring artists on, right? And, we like to get their backstory. We like to learn more about them, what makes them unique as an artist, and ultimately what makes them cut different,
Yep.
right? And so I kind of want to pass it over to you, get your perspective on, up and coming in the industry, the early days, how you got your start, and we'll work our way up to the contemporary times.
Wow. I mean, I started making music very early on. I think I just love music for me as an escape. I wasn't thinking of, initially I was thinking of just, recording music and becoming an artist. And I just felt like, okay, I listen to music. If I could write some songs and listen to them, it's going to actually do something to me positively and, maybe let me feel less in a down mode and, help me feel better just as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's what got me into writing music. And I was inspired by a lot of songs from, by a lot of the contemporary rock artists of the late 80s, early 90s, primarily, which is interesting because if you hear my sound now, like you might know that, see that. But, I started as a songwriter in that vein because the lyrics, the way I was able to convey feeling through the songs is what was pushing me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I actually eventually had the opportunity of, getting to the studio to record like my very, very first song, um, at that time, I was in Port Harcourt, Nigeria, anyone who is familiar with Burna Boy would know, that's where Burna Boy, started music from as well. And, a lot of the artists that I was growing up around at the time, I mean, we didn't really know what to call our music back then. We were just inspired by so many different sounds and we just did what we felt. So it bred a very unique caliber of artist at the time. I mean, this is before Afro beats was even a genre.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of people who did rap and fused it with some of the languages or some of the pidgin English. And I wanted to do different because I had this whole um, rock background and I wanted to infuse it to see something that can connect with the people. And I recorded this first song called I Don't Tire, which was like a Jay Z Linkin Park type song, like Numb, the Jay Z
Yeah,
Linkin
yeah,
Park song,
yeah.
but we're speaking pidgin English. That's the broken English or the patois in
Mm-hmm.
Nigeria, and that's nobody's heard stuff like that
Yeah.
before. It was so different. It was so fresh. It was so new that it really resonated in the local scene. Like it was all over the Port Harcourt radio scene. A lot of people till today, that song is like an urban legend. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I've lived different lives in the music industry because that was 2005 that record came out, and when I didn't see myself like here. I didn't even know. I was born in the US, but I was there. I didn't even know coming back here and, trying to build something different or build Afrobeats or do something. I didn't even see that at the time. I was just doing it based on I just was passionate about the stuff and I just wanted to put something out there that can make people feel good
Mm-hmm.
because it made me feel good. So now I can make more people feel good, the more people that get to hear what I do feel good. And that was my mission. And it's still my mission to today.
Yeah. So pretty much just getting started because you were passionate about it. Obviously, playing into that early influence, staying true to you allowed you to cultivate a very unique sound. And then so you start getting radio play, you start to get more exposure, you start to make people feel good and transmit that energy, right? And then so like when did you know in your mind like, all right, bet like this is where I'm on the right path, this is where I want to be, and then start to evolve from there?
Before my first record, I actually knew where I actually knew what I wanted to do. When I made up my mind I want to be a recording artist, I didn't have access to a studio. I didn't have access to studio gear. I didn't have access to computers then. What I did was I had in the church, I used to be in the choir, and I used to play the piano for the church choir, and we used to use one of those I think it was a Yamaha PSR 70, something like that. It uses a floppy disk drive. I don't know.
Yeah, I've heard
the
of
youngins,
it. I've heard of it,
who
yeah.
knows what a floppy? I don't know the youngins here. They might not know what I'm talking about, but it's like a square data disk that you put into the piano, and it tries to record what you're doing. So I would either use a floppy disk drive to save anything that I sequence. Like I used to program the instrumentals on. I used to basically produce on the piano. This is before, people were doing stuff on the computers. There was no Fruity Loops. There was no nothing.
Yeah.
So, and then I would have, if I want to listen to what I created outside of having the piano, because I didn't own the piano, I had to go to church to use the piano. But to listen to what I've created at home, I had to have the guy who records the pastor's, sermons record what I've created on the piano, so I can get it on an actual cassette tape, and I can listen to it at home on my cassette player or Walkman back then. So that's how I started producing music. This is like 98, 90, 97, 98. And
I was born in 97. Yeah.
wow.
Okay, bet. You've been doing this for a minute. All
So,
right.
but back then, this is what I envisioned. I mean, like getting in the studio and recording a full length song was like winning the Grammys to me at the time. Like it felt like impossible, like so out of reach, because I didn't have anybody who was going to get me in the studio. I didn't have any whatever. So, but I knew that I wanted to record music. I wanted to have. I already knew that I had a sound. I didn't need a validation from people. I already knew that I had a sound because it did something to me. It made me feel good. And that self validation that it gave me was enough for me to understand who I was as a person and where I wanted to be. So I now channeled that positive optimism to get into a studio. I became a keyboardist at the age of 15. I got a job as a keyboardist, my first job in the studio. And then while I was in the studio, we had other older back. I think they just got a computer, just installed a software called Fruity Tracks. For those who don't know, that's what it was called before Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
So Fruity Tracks at the time was what we were using, and I think 2 years down the road they changed it to Fruity Loops. So I started learning how to sequence because I could play the piano, and because I already had that background of making music, on the piano. I was able to just like, do some audio transitions into like recorded directly into computer, and I learned how to use DAWs to like, put them in different channels, and I watched, some of the older guys who were more seasoned, sound engineers do a whole bunch of, mixing, and that's how I actually literally started. I just got in the door by having something that they needed, which is they needed keyboardists. And I used that opportunity to learn how to now actually record artists. And then I started getting paid to record artists. And that's how I kind of like started. So for a long time, I was producing music, knowing that I wanted to also have my music out there. And this is what kind of led up to when my first official, I mean, I was recording music since like 2003. My first official single that came out and was on radio, and people got to ask who's this Duncan Daniels guy, was the song called I Don't Tire, featuring a guy named Roddy Ansa. Back then they were a hip hop duo called Specimen A. And funny enough, if you guys watch the Netflix series AfroBeats Backstory, I'm actually on season 2.
Mm,
It's coming out in December, and I talk about a whole bunch of this stuff on there.
mm.
So you guys, keep an eye out on Netflix season 2, AfroBeats Backstory. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've known, and I think every artist has to have that positive, like thinking about where you want to be,
Mm,
seeing it, and then letting the universe guide you there. But
mm,
if you don't see it, it's much harder to get there. You know.
mm. That's hard. So that was like you were manifesting before The
Oh,
Secret,
every
before,
single thing,
yeah.
every single thing that's happened in my life, once upon a time was a dream. It was a dream for me to be in the studio. I got in the studio. It was a dream for me to have a recorded song on the radio. I had a recorded song on the radio. It was a dream for me to go to Berklee College of Music. I got into Berklee College of Music. It was a dream to have an album recorded, mastered at Abbey Road Studios by the same guys that worked on the Beatles. I did that. You know, these are things that I've envisioned 10, 15 years ago. It was a dream to be part of the Recording Academy. I'm not part of the Recording Academy. So I've always seen it, and then I do the work. I don't just sit on my butt and just hope it lands on my feet. I see it, and then I start working. Now, it might take longer because sometimes, you got to do it yourself. You can't sit and wait for someone to do it for you.
Mhm.
You know, for instance, I want to record in the studio. What did I do? I provided a service, keyboardist. That got me in the door. I wanted to, you know, be an artist, have records. I learned how to produce. I produced myself, produced orders, other people. I had music out there on radio. I wanted to, fast forward to wanting to get signed to a record label, right? I didn't get signed to a record label as an artist. What did I do? I started my own record label.
Mm,
I signed myself. I still did what I did. And now, anybody who looks at my catalog online, always going to see the name of my record label, Dunkishrock Production. You know, it's built so much, catalogs for itself because, the amount of music that you put in, your catalog builds over and over.
mm,
I wanted to have a marketing company that helps with my promotion and helps my music get out there more. I didn't get no marketing deal, sponsorship. I created my own marketing company.
mm.
And so you can't just sit down and wait and think that someone's gonna come do it for you. If no one comes to do it for you, do it for yourself.
Mm.
And that's, I think, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. The only difference is that sometimes for some people it's faster, but faster is not always the best because faster doesn't give you experience. It doesn't season you. It doesn't test you. It doesn't prepare you. Because the higher the faster you rise to a position, the quicker you can fall. You're not gonna know where to stand up from because you never learned anything because you had that instant luck and you got there. So you didn't go through the process of conditioning to be able to manage, you know, the reverse of it. That's why I love artists get depressed. Love artists don't have balance in their life. So I, you know, I wouldn't change anything about the way things have been for me because I feel like it was supposed to be that way for me, and I'm still not where I feel like I should be. So I keep working every day to get there.
Hmm. And so, one, thank you for that. That was a lot of game, a lot of free gems. Make sure you're paying attention. Again, this man is a legend, so please listen to what he's talking about. But so you mentioned too as well, like the whole element of people these days. The whole hot thing right now in 2023 is, oh, I'm having motion.
Hmm.
But are you having motion or are you having action? Right? I think those are two different things. Does it look good or is it actually good? And so you mentioned the label situation. You didn't necessarily get signed to a label, so you started your own label. You didn't get a marketing deal, so you started your own marketing deal or your marketing team or
Company.
company,
Hmm.
right? So my question to you is so by taking that path, right, of independence, what are the benefits to that? And for the artists that are watching this, a lot of artists watch this platform. It's like, what is the benefit to being an independent artist and versus being signed? I hear a lot of stuff going on in the music
Well,
industry.
I mean, being signed just depends on the deal. You know, for instance, if you're an artist out of gate and you get a 360 deal, that might be your undoing, especially in today's age. Back, let's say 15, 20 years ago, the way it worked was a label would find some guy in the middle of nowhere who has an amazing voice, sounds like MJ, beautiful voice, can dance, has great looks, and they're like, that's a star. They say that's a star. Nobody knows who this person is. They say that's a star. Basically, what they do is they take that person and they bring it to the audience and say, "Hey, audience, this person is a star. So treat them like a star."
Mm.
They give them the gear, they give them the house, they give them the cars, they give them all the flashy things to make them look like a star, to sell the records of the artist. But guess what? The deal that he signed is a 360 deal. So when the artist sells those records, right, they own the masters, right? They have to recoup all that flashy stuff that they gave the artist off of the earnings from the artist sales. And if the artist sales doesn't cover all that flashy stuff, the artist gets to owe them money, right? So if the artist is signed to a 7-year contract where they have to do 7 albums, he has to fulfill that contract to the point where every album has to accrue to that advance or those things that were done. And if it's not doing that, the artist is not making any money because all of the stuff they look fly, they look
Yeah,
flashy, they
it
look
look
all
good.
that, but they still have to pay the label back all that money invested.
Mm.
Label has to collect their share before they even start. The artist starts getting their cut, and then the artist still has to pay their manager or their publicist or their staff or their producer and all that. So there's a way to look at that. It might not be all glamorous, but at least back then is the public have been told this person is a star, and the public has been sold that, and they believe that. Example, like a Britney Spears, right? Baby, hit me one more time. This is a star, you guys, right? She doesn't have to do anything. We've told you this is a star. She's on the radio 247. They're pumping her on the radio. You have no choice but to listen to, it. Now today, fast forward to the world of social media and streaming and all that. You can't do that anymore. You can't just take somebody and say, this is a star, because people now have developed a way where they don't need to be told this person is a star. The artist is the one selling themselves directly to the audience and saying, I'm a star, believe me,
Mm.
I'm a star. And they're doing all the flashy things, all the content, all the music, all the lives, all the social media activities to build that evidence of them being a star and build that organic evidence that they are a star.
Mm-hmm.
And then what the artist does, what the label now does today is they sit back and watch who's doing that, who's proven or um, who's telling this people who's out who which artist out there that has all this wonderful characteristics and skills has proven to people that they're a star and they believe it, has sold the fact that they're a star and they believe it. And then when they see that the artist has done all that, that's when they swoop in.
Mm.
So gone are the days where, you know, I can sing, I can rap, I can, I'm fly, I have good looks. Come sign me. That doesn't work anymore. What labels look for is someone who has done all literally all the work, all the artist development, all the fan building, all the, creativity to create that belief that they are who they are.
Mm.
And that's when sometimes the labels can now come in and maybe not give them a 360 deal, but sign a distribution deal, maybe a marketing deal, maybe a labeled services deal, or maybe a full 360 deal, but you get a certain percentage because you've done part of the work. So in those scenarios, a label could be good because if you think about it, like say for instance, when Instagram came out, right? Instagram did so well. They put a lot of money into Instagram to make it attractive, and then Meta bought Instagram. I mean, back then it was Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Paid $1 billion for Instagram and owns Instagram. That's literally what labels doing today. So you as an artist, an independent artist, basically you're you're a startup company.
Mm.
You're like on Shark Tank, and the people sitting across the table are the labels. They want to see what you've been able to do to prove to people that you have a viable product, right? And that's when they come to you, and they might give you a favorite deal, they might not. Or sometimes you could be like, if I've done all this work and I'm getting all these perks based on my hard work that I've done, why do I need to split it with a label? Why do I need to do percentages?
Mm-hmm.
I could be good, just getting what I'm getting from my fans that are buying my stuff, that buy my merch, they come to my shows, and I don't have to split it with nobody. I mean, the artists have done. I mean, Macklemore, wasn't signed for the longest time and was making all that earnings. Tobe Wigwe, I don't know if he's recently signed anything, but last I heard, he was still independent, and he's getting all that that show money. He's not having to split it with the labels, all those sales, and not having to split with labels. So there are different ways to look at it. Labels are good. They can help you scale certain places or get in certain rooms that you probably would not get into or might have to pay a lot to get into because there's connection, especially now with streaming. It's all about who you know at the DSPs that's going to put your music in what playlist or what editorial playlist to get it the right spins, right amount of passive listeners, the right amount of fan engagement,
Mm.
and everything's all data driven now. You have so many ways of building outside of just sitting there with your music and waiting for someone to just go listen to it.
Yeah.
There's so much technology that works in the back end to drive how you get your music. Like when you hit on Spotify and you play a song, right? And that's the song you want to hear, and you're hoping that the next song is a continuation of that album that you're listening to, but then all of a sudden you hear some random song
Yeah.
that just pops in there. That's all behind the scenes work, behind the scenes campaigns, behind the scenes, ads running, that's getting, and these labels have a massive amount of money and a massive amount of connections and ties with certain people, certain key people in these DSPs that help them get favorable placements. They have favorable ad tools that are not even available to the regular consumer, the regular independent artist, who has maybe access to like Spotify ad system management system, things like that.
Mm.
So there are perks to being with a label because the label will take you if you've proven that you're viable. The label can take your viability and scale it times 10 in a shorter amount of time than you with your independent budget,
Mm-hmm.
because it's all about money, you know.
So how does it work when, or we could talk about this all day. Last question I'm gonna ask about that, and then we're gonna get back into like
Oh
the,
yeah,
the
sorry, I
albums
can
and
go on and on. So
yeah,
I
nah. I
apologize.
mean, we're giving game. I mean, the purpose of this episode is to give game, right? So, from the independent perspective, right? Like artists might not sign to a major, but then they'll sign to an independent, like Megan Thee Stallion signed. I don't know who the guy is. I think he played baseball or something. But like you sign to like a a subsidiary. So like, is that the same way, or is that more so just like, okay, we believe in you enough to give you some money, and then now, okay, you've got a little bit of gasoline for you to continue to build as an artist until the major labels start to see.
Yeah, and it's just like what's the right word? It's like an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these independent labels are like incubators. They take in a bunch of artists and provide some of the knowledge and some of those services that them as artists would not know, and then they build them to the point where, you know, they make money or get a cut off of the major labels signing them.
Mm.
So it's an incentive for them to do all that artist development and get the artists on the right, viable track, so that they can now present them to a label and say, "Hey, these guys are They have the fan recognition. They built their own fan base. We've helped them get to a certain level. Now we need that label money.
Mm.
You know,
And then they keep a
yeah.
percentage.
And another thing too, another point as well. And I was talking to an artist who got offered a deal recently, and she wanted my advice on whether to take the deal or if she should, still go independent for a little longer. And I laid out some pros and cons. And one of the biggest um, pros as an independent artist is if you're signed to a major label, for instance, and you have an advance, and the advance is put towards, or you have a budget that's put towards your project, you know. Now, because you're signed to a big label, you're not going to be recording no shabby, the
Yeah.
label is going to pay for, some, Scott Stutch type guy to come in and do the production, or
Or Mike Dean.
some
or
Mike
something
Dean
like that.
guy, or some crazy engineer in some studio with a $25,000 microphone and all the works, and the record comes out and it's still the same record. It just has some little glitz and glass here,
Mhm.
but as an independent artist, you may have just used your $1,500 laptop with your $500 microphone and your $300 sound card, to record the same music.
Yeah.
And guess what? You don't have to pay that money back to anyone.
Mhm.
But you, as a signed artist, if it took 50 grand to produce that one record that's only going to sell for $0.02 per stream, you still have to, the label has to recoup that money, that 50 grand that he put up for your recording.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying?
And then after they recoup, you still only getting like 15, 20%.
Exactly.
Damn.
So you got to look at it that way, and these are some of the things and some of the nuances that a lot of artists don't think about, especially the ones that don't read, because some people are dyslexic. They don't read. They don't read them contracts. I've had to look at some contracts and bruh, did you see this? And they're like, what? Yeah, that's there. You need to talk to them about that.
Mhm.
You know. So yeah, so you got to look at the pros and cons, and see what works for you. Um, yeah, so that's what I got to say about that.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I was really excited to talk about that topic with
Sure.
Mr. Duncan Daniels. So let's talk about your last project, S.O.L.O.
Yeah.
So you recorded that in Abbey Road Studios.
No, I actually recorded that in my studio, Dunkishrock Production, and my studio is my own home studio, and it's just me, just like the album's called S.O.L.O,
Mm-hmm.
Songs of Limitless Optimism, but it actually doubles on itself with the word solo, which is an acronym. But solo, it literally means me, just by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the song is from track 1 to track 10. It's just me from start to finish. And I did that album I finished that album in the space of 2 weeks.
Mm.
And then it took me 8 months to release it, to
Mm.
prep for release. And that involved, taking it to the folks at Abbey Roads and saying, look, this is an album I've recorded. I would like it to get mastered here and have that Abbey Road signature, that sound. And I think I didn't know this, but I realized after the fact that no Afrobeats artist has done that. And they were so proud of the fact that they have an album that they fully mastered over there. So that's how that came about. And after the project, they invited me over to the studio in London, to the iconic Abbey Road studio in London, so that I could do an interview and talk about the project as well. So that was a huge. I mean, that's still one of my best works till today in terms of sonics, like the actual sound of the album is so pristine and so clear. It's the first album that I put out in Dolby Atmos, so it's immersive. You can have an immersive listening experience of the album. So if you use the spatial audio headphones, you can get the whole spatial audio effect of the song,
Mm-hmm.
the songs, and album just went over, I think, just about a month ago. It just surpassed 1 million streams on
Congratulations.
Spotify, but it's done over 3 million streams across platforms, and it's still going. You know, people discovering music every day, and I've still been putting out singles since then. Still promoting the album. You know, still doing what I can as an independent artist. So, I would say I'm really proud of that body of work.
Absolutely. And congratulations on it. 1 million streams. I'm gonna give you some
Thanks.
I'm gonna give you some flowers. And so I slipped up right there and even said, hey, like, oh, so you recorded this at Abbey Road. But then that speaks into the process of creating music as well. A lot
Yeah.
of people think, like you mentioned, artists will sign and then they might go get a Mike Dean and then
Yeah.
they might record into a $20,000 mic.
Mm-hmm.
But you can record on your microphone at the crib. You can program your beats on the laptop at the crib, but then you can send it to a top level studio. They mix it, master it down, and now you got crazy sound.
Yeah.
So speak to that a little bit too, because
Oh,
even
yeah.
I just slipped up on that.
I mean,
like,
I'm an audio engineer too. Like I actually went to school for mixing and MP&E. And I've mixed so many artists I can't even count. Geez, like I mix so much music. I don't get to do it as much now, but I'm a ear guy. Like, but at a point I was like, I don't want to keep mixing my music because I'm gonna be biased. I want someone else to touch it. So that's when I started, like, doing some research and trying to hear, different mixes from different people. And outside of Abbey Road Studios, um, right now I work with two people specifically. One of the guys I work with, he works for Warner Music. He does all the stuff for Warner, all their Adobe Atmos spatial audio mixes. He's based out of California. His name is Alex Alex Solano. He owns a company called Alex Promix, and he now mixes for a lot of Afro. After me, everybody heard what he did on Solo, and, like, everybody got him to start doing. So now he's done stuff for Davido. He's done stuff for Yemi Alade. He's now doing stuff for a lot of Afrobeats artists. And then another guy by the name of Krez, who's based out of London, and he usually he mixes some of my records depending on the style of record. If it's something that is very pop R&B ish sounding, I send it to him because he really has an ear for making something very, very radio friendly. So that's my man Krez. He's also a rapper, very good, talented rapper as well. So you know, but there's so many great, like you said, you can test different mixes, have different people play around with your sound, because sometimes mixing is very subjective, especially in today's world. But obviously a bad mix is a bad mix. You can't
Absolutely.
do anything about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so kind of wrapping it up here and getting into, like, kind of where we are right now. So you have a platform, AfroBeats US base, where you put on a lot of younger Afrobeats artists in the US that are making waves, that are making it happen in the space in the US. So speak to that a little bit. Like, talk about collaboration and being an artist yourself and achieving what you've achieved, accomplishing what you've accomplished. Passing that game on, and then also giving other artists a platform to grow as well.
Oh, you see, when we started making Afro beats for the artists who are based in America, who were, when we started, like, 2006, there were artists like me making Afro beats, and we're here in America. Afro beats wasn't popular. It wasn't popping the way it is, now. As a matter of fact, the name Afro beats was still very new. I think it just started getting coined. I think it started getting coined in the UK. Like, people like Afro beats. Back then we used to call it Afro hip hop, Afro pop, Afro something, Afro beats, and then there was Afro beats without the S, which was what like the legend Fela Kuti used to, the sound that he had, and I feel like we were kind of ahead of our time. Because why I say that is because a lot of, it's not everyone who has the ability to stay consistent like I've been and it's still here. So you have a lot of artists that, were very good, very talented, but they didn't really see the fruit of their labor because of, it wasn't the moment,
Mm.
you know. And then some relocated, moved to Nigeria or Ghana to kind of, do the music there because it was popular there and it was
Mm-hmm.
rising there. And that's where artists like Wizkid came from. I mean, the guy who signed Wizkid and started Wizkid's career was, somebody just like me, based out in New York. Banky W. He was making his music here, and then moved to Lagos, and you know, started doing his music, became popular, signed Wizkid, got Wizkid, to a certain light, before Wizkid got picked up. You know, there were so many other people, that moved back there. And why I'm saying this is to kind of like lead into Afrobeats US based, because when you hear Afrobeats, typically what comes to your mind is Burna Boy, Whiskey DeVito, and most of the artists coming from Africa. If you tell a typical person that, hey, have you heard this Afrobeats artist that is from the U.S. and lives in the U.S. and makes music in the U.S.?
Yeah.
It sounds such like a foreign concept,
Yeah.
you know. And because America is so big, and you can like be a drop of water in a big ocean as an Afrobeats artist just because of how big America is. It's hard for one artist in Houston to know one artist in New York and what they're doing on their sound because of how big. Now, London, where they now have their own Afrobeat sound, sometimes they call Afro swing, London is a little smaller. So people, they meet at shows, they hear people's music now, they build a community off of that. And then you now start spinning into the radio, and now now start having a fusion of Afro beats and like a drill sound, and they have their own thing going. But
Mm.
here, it never really existed. Even when we tried to do it back then before social media, we used to have reunions where we meet in one city here and there once a year. But I mean, someone could put out how many songs in a year? You never hear it.
Yeah.
So I decided, it would be nice, first off, to create an organization that almost like a buddy where an Afrobeat artist who is just feels like they don't know what's going on, or they don't know how to start their career, or they've been doing their thing but they haven't gotten any support. That is a buddy that's kind of like there to look out for them or to give them resources and things like that. So um, I started the organization OSDA, which is the Association of US Diaspora Afrobeats Artists.
Mm.
It's not like a big, wider. It's more like key members, a lot of old OG folks who have been doing this thing for a very long time. A lot of people who have now moved on from just being artists to becoming executives, labels, media managers, businessmen, financial gurus, lawyers, but people who are vested in that community of Afrobeats artists here in America that want to see that future brighter, get brighter. And we're coming together, or we're coming up with different initiatives, and that's where the Afrobeats US based side of segue of things, came about. Because then, if you're just an organization, how are people going to hear about you, right? How are you going to know what Afrobeats artists exist?
Mm.
So with Afrobeats US based, that wasn't something that I decided to create as a way to discover new artists that are not necessarily part of OSDA, the association, and know that, okay, this person exists, this person has a sound. Put it in a place where other artists and other people in the diaspora can go to, and to know that there's one place that I can go to on Spotify, and I get to hear the artists in America that sing, the Afrobeats artists that are in America that are making good music, and it keeps updating every Friday with as new music comes about.
Mm.
And because of social media, when one artist see their friend post that they're on the platform, they're gonna be like, "What's that platform that's only supporting?" Because it's such a foreign concept.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when I created the playlist on Spotify, I put in a search Afrobeats US based, and there was zip. Not one single playlist existed. Nobody had thought to do that. That's how bad it was when it comes to people just not the industry as a whole neglecting the fact that they're Afrobeats artists based here and making good music.
Mm-hmm.
So now I decided to build that, and then I took it a step further by, highlighting artists of the week, getting them on interviews to talk about their processes, and and then more artists watch. They also want to be featured, so they reach out. Then I get to discover new artists in that fashion, and I'm like, oh, this person's dope. And because I have that ear, like I'm also an A&R, so and I've A&R other projects for other artists. I'm able to I'll say, well, okay, this person has only 10 monthly listeners, but they're fire.
Mm.
How can I help them get 1,000 monthly listeners? So I put them on the playlist, and then they now have 1,000 monthly listeners. Now they're being spread across the entire America or even wider, because the people in the UK want to know what's going on in the US as well.
Mm.
And if you're somebody who's looking for something different, and you want to hear some Afrobeats that's different from just the popular guys that the Ashakes and the Remas, there's a place for you to go, and that's Afrobeats US based. So that was the niche of creating this platform. And I think it's going to yield more. I mean, Ozda's growing. We're planning out series of festivals and showcases across the country. So it's an ongoing work. It's slow, but it's surely moving. So that's all I gotta say to that.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. And it's awesome to hear like another artist stepping and saying, all right, well, there's nothing here to support artists that, I would argue say something that you probably wish you had when you were coming up too.
Yeah.
So it's like, being able to turn around and give back, that's beautiful. And so safe to say you're cut different, Duncan Daniels. And so, yeah, I mean, usually what we like to do is wrapping things up is just to get a perspective, a one-liner, a motto, something that you say to yourself, something that you live by. Maybe when you were a kid, you heard it and it just stuck with you your whole life. What would that one thing be?
That's without. I mean, that just goes without saying. Be yourself.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the realest thing I've ever heard someone tell me, and it's something that I always use as an anchor for myself as an artist. As an artist, it's important to evolve. If you look at all the great artists that have tested time, Madonna, Ye, Jay-Z, one thing they have in common is that they were able to evolve with time.
Mm.
So like you mentioned this to me yesterday at my show.
Mm-hmm.
You said you've been doing this music for so long, but your stuff still sounds like today.
Mm-hmm.
Even if my music sounds like today, it still has elements of me.
Mm-hmm.
I just evolve, and I keep that what makes me Dunkishrock.
Mm.
That's me being myself. So I live by that. I take that to anywhere.
Mm. Well, that's beautiful. And thank you so much for joining us on Cut Different TV, man.
Thanks for having me, man. This is fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll be back again.
Yeah.
So we're about to get him to perform some music for y'all. So y'all going to get an opportunity to check him out live as well. But, without further ado, I go by the name of Sebastian Ryder. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Cut Different TV. And before I forget, because I was just about to forget, where can they find you on social media?
It's so easy. I'm at Dunkishrock. So Dunkishrock. Dunkishrock. And that's everywhere, on Twitter, on Instagram, and then on TikTok, it's at Duncan Daniels Music.
Mm. Duncan Daniels Music on TikTok, Dunkishrock everywhere else. You know where to find them. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Cut Different TV. We out.